they find themselves, you know, intellectual humility just, I don't know, happens for these kids. Anyway, does anybody have any questions so far? Yeah, okay.
They say it takes a village to raise a child.
And
And somebody says that, I don't know if it's true or not.
yeah.
But my question is, when you talk about virtues, which I assume flow from values, the values flow from our society.
So
Nowadays we have a very diverse society everywhere.
yeah.
How does that affect that whole cycle?
Yeah, I would want to draw a pretty clear distinction between virtues and values. And I wish I had, and maybe I should take the time to go into exactly what I mean by virtues. There's a specific thing that I'm talking about here, and it's kind of a Western notion, but as virtue theory has become a really hot topic in philosophy for the last like 30 years, it is growing and becoming it's really, the philosophers who are doing work in this field are looking more and more at wider and wider ethnic and cultural and religious descriptions of virtue, and trying to draw a wider and wider umbrella of what virtue is. But virtue and values aren't synonyms for each other. I would say that there is a relationship, but I wouldn't say that virtues come from values. And values themselves is a pretty complicated idea, right? What you value or like what you talk about. You can talk about a community's values. You can talk about a person's individual values, and then you can talk about what you value, as in what you think something is valuable. You talk about. I mean, that's. I don't know. I don't see values and virtues as the same thing. Virtues are more like character traits, whereas values could be more set as far as like what cultural expectations are, or and you would hope that they would align. Yeah, you would hope that they would align. But for instance, right now, I would say as an American values right now, Americans don't value the kind of civic discourse that I think would be virtuous. Does that make sense?
What is an example of a virtue?
An example of a virtue, open-mindedness is an example of a virtue, but at the same time I don't see open-mindedness valued in American culture as much as I see sort of combativeness in civic discourse being valued in American culture. So, yeah.
So virtues are human traits.
Virtues are human traits. Aristotle, the way he set them up is virtues are a golden mean of action and thought that lay between two opposing vices, right? So for instance, courage is a virtue that lay in between the two extremes of the vice of cowardice, which is a vice of deficiency. There's not enough courage. And on the other extreme would be the vice of rashness, which is too much courage, so much courage that you're not taking your safety and the safety of other people into consideration, and you're doing something that's stupid, right? In talking about this with my students, I give the example of like on the battlefield. It's the easiest place to imagine courage, right? So on the battlefield, the individual soldier who has courage understands and acts with courage in a situation where there is danger, but they act bravely in a way that helps themselves and their fellow soldiers towards their objective. The rash individual just hurls themselves towards the enemy and gets themselves killed and probably gets their fellow soldiers killed because they're not thinking carefully about the situation. It's hard for them to say the person was brave. They were just rash. They were stupid, right? And then the coward is the person who never takes any action because they're paralyzed with fear. So is that probably too long-winded an answer? Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, you have talked like virtue is an absolute thing, or the other, right now you said the virtue is average of two extremes. So in fact, a suicide bomber is the virtuous man on the extreme, where he's so courageous that he can kill himself for his ideals. And on the other hand, there is a person who will not lift his finger to do something good. So, but in my opinion, you cannot define virtue because virtue keep on changing, not with the environment, not with the society, but change in your itself. When you are a child, virtue means something else. When you are a boy, the virtue is something else. When you become a husband, the virtue is something else. When you become an old man like me, then virtue is something else. So virtue keeps on changing with the society, with the climate, with the environment, with the ideology, with the man, with the age, with everything.
Sure.
So how you can quantify virtue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I never meant to give the impression that virtue was a Platonic ideal or a static thing at all. I do think that it is contingent, and Aristotle's idea that virtue is a medium between two extremes is just, well, it's an ancient Aristotelian idea. It's not necessarily my idea, right? I'm just trying to give one definition of virtue. But virtue, if I'm going to define it, it really is an action that benefits the actor and also benefits every single other person who is affected by that action.
You mean the audience?
I mean anybody. Even those who are not aware that they are affected by that action. If they are affected by that action, the effect is positive. Right? So that action is virtuous. Right? So you see how it's not some kind of an ideal, but it is rather the action that when it is taken, that action is beneficial for the actor and for the people who are recipients of that action or on the other, the affected by that action. And then that action also continues to be beneficial to anyone else who is affected directly by that action, right? And so it's a pretty high bar, but it's not an unattainable bar, right? And it is certainly not like some kind of a Platonic ideal or static, set in stone kind of thing. Yeah.
Do you think like you're talking about the virtue? So you're born with those, and
Not at all.
not at all. Okay.
No.
So and it gets corrupted with time and with society. And we learn things from outer world, and
Yeah.
then we get distort things, and is it like that?
Yeah, I would. This is definitely much more of a. I would say it swings more towards an empirical, tabula rasa kind of notion of nature epistemologically. Like if you're talking about where does knowledge come from and that sort of thing. I don't think that it's not defining virtue as being some kind of an inherited character trait. at all. I think it has a lot more to do with nurture and upbringing and training and habituation. And so, you know, a lot more Hume, a lot less Noam Chomsky, I guess. Or maybe some Noam Chomsky's in there, okay. But the more empirical, less rationalism, right?
Yeah. So you talked about two intellectual virtues. Can you give an example of two moral virtues?
Well, virtues are all moral.
So values are different from virtues, but virtues and morals are the same thing.
Well, I mean, I can't think of an immoral virtue.
Can I just ask you a question?
Sure.
I can give you an example of an immoral virtue.
Okay.
Suppose you are passing and you have seen a man with a pistol trying to find somebody, and then he asks, "Did you see that man here?" I mean, a man with a pistol. And you know that he's going to kill him. And you say, no such person here. So you are talking a blatant lie, but it is virtuous because you are saving the life of that man by.
It's not immoral.
Yeah, that's not immoral. That would be moral, actually.
So it's an immoral virtue.
Yeah, it's a moral virtue. It's not an immoral virtue.
It's a moral.
Yeah, it is. It's a moral virtue.
To tell a lie is a virtue.
In that situation, absolutely. Yeah. If you were in my car and somebody told me, you know, they called me on the phone and they asked me where you were because they wanted to kill you, I would feel the moral thing to do would be to tell them I don't know where you are.
You're saying the same thing.
Yeah. It would, the immoral thing for me to do would be to tell them where are you, that you're in my car. Because I think it would be immoral for me to cause your dad.
It is immoral because it is lying. That kind of
Yeah, that's a deontological, approach that there are certain rules, right? Like lying is a rule that, and then if you break the rule, right? Virtual moral theory is a competing moral theory to deontological moral theory or utilitarian moral theory, right? So this is not a utilitarian moral theory where it's consequentialist. What happens is what determines if it's good or bad. This is not a deontological moral theory where the rules decide what's good or bad. This is a different moral theory altogether, virtue theory. Yeah.
Shai?
Shai?
Let me ask you this. It's, and taking off somewhat to a different subject.
Okay.
Intellectual humility. You talked about that. Some people actually have a lot to be humble about. Intellectual humility. I'm wondering if somehow you would not encourage them otherwise, in the sense that they already have so much humility that they cannot achieve all those flourishing aspects in life.
Yeah.
Because of that humility, their self-esteem is so low.
Good.
So they should actually try to overcome that, and instead of feeling humble about it,
Right.
try to raise their self-esteem.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, it is also true that on each altar of ego, there's an idol, and everybody seems to be worshipping himself. That's a modern Facebook kind of ego that goes on, where certainly you need some humility, where you don't come across in social media as I am the perfect person, look at the food I was eating at that restaurant, you can't eat that food. So in the modern aspect, I think what you're teaching the younger generation has great value, but as you're teaching children, I think, from the inner city, areas, I think society has already humiliated them so much that now they need encouragement from you that, hey, rise above this humility and count.
Sure, sure. Wonderful, wonderful observation. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you know, intellectual humility is a virtue. That doesn't mean that you should that humility is not the same thing as having low self-esteem, right? And that it's actually two really, really different things. Humility is when you have done something that others would brag about, but you will not brag about it because that is not your focus, right? That's humility. Sort of failing to recognize your own capabilities or accomplishments just in a realistic way, like you know, I really did write a paper that, or did this research, or you know, whatever, you know, just not to brag about it, but just recognizing the fact that you were a part of this, or that you did it, and that you're unable to see that there was any value in that. That's a different problem. That's a psychological problem rather than a virtue issue, and or a social anxiety problem or something. And that I mean, Aristotle would have something to say about that, but modern virtue theory would say you poor thing, you know, find some confidence, you know, believe in yourself, build yourself up, and you know, don't, because a person like that needs to build enough self up to be able to attain a position of virtue. Does that make sense? Like if you don't have a solid sense of self and some self-confidence about it, then you haven't yet developed enough character to have character traits to be a part of a virtuous community, right? Part of the essence of virtue is that you are a part of a community where you can play a role as a role model, right? Part of being in Aristotle's idea of teaching people virtue, his whole point was to teach people to be public spokespeople and politicians in the best sense, right? In the best sense of helping people see great solutions to community problems and presenting rhetoric, not in the negative sense, but in the best way of helping people recognize the best solutions